Good afternoon and welcome to My Harlem Portraits Special Edition Tribeca Festival 2025. During this conversation, we are going to talk about KITES, a film which is had its world premiere at Tribeca 2025 in the Viewpoints section. And we are going to talk about it with the writer, director, and producer of the movie, Mr. Walter Thompson-Hernandez. Welcome to My Harlem Portrait,
Thanks
Walter.
for having me. Appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about your career, who you are, and where do you come from in Brazil? Because
Yeah, so I'm from Los Angeles.
ah,
My mom is Mexican, my dad is African American. He's black, but I've spent a lot of time in Brazil. I've worked there. I lived there. All my friends in the movie are from Rio. They're really dear friends of mine. Yeah, I'm from Los Angeles. I started my career as a New York Times journalist for a lot of years.
mhm,
And when I was at the New York Times, that's when I first traveled to Brazil to report on different stories.
mhm.
And I sort of, I started a relationship with a lot of people there and a lot of friends and colleagues. And that's kind of how we made the movie eventually.
So that's how. So how did you get in touch? This is very interesting story. How did you get in touch with Duvo?
Yeah, totally. So Duvo, that's his he's a musician. He's a rap artist. He's a rapper, hip hop musician.
Mhm.
And Duvo is his performance name. And so I have a friend named Thiago who's also in the movie. He plays Thiago, he plays himself. Him and Duvo are childhood friends. And I was talking to Thiago. I was like, hey man, I think we need, somebody who can play this main character who's strong and has a big presence. And he's like, "Oh, I have a friend named Duvo. Him and I are great friends, and I'll bring him." And so he brought him, and it worked. There was no casting, no casting call, no auditions. He just showed up, and I was like, "I think he's great."
Fantastic. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so the story, because at the beginning it says that this is based on a true story, right? It's a true story of, it's not obviously then a true story about Duvo, who is a rap artist, or is it?
Right. That's a great point. I wrote It's a True Story because the movie feels like a collection of true stories, right? The movie, there was no script, so everyone is essentially a co-writer with me, right?
Mhm.
I ask people to play versions of lives and of people that they kind of already know. So it says true story because, a lot of the scenes and memories of police violence are real. You
Mhm.
know, there's a scene at the end of the movie where we see T-shirts with children's faces on
Yes.
them. Those are all real victims of police violence in Rio. And every sort of story in the movie, about life, about violence, about death, about kites is a real story. And so it's essentially, a version of a documentary and a narrative fictional film in one.
Yes. That's that very, very interesting.
Mhm.
And uh, the favelas. Tell us, first of all, a little bit about the movie, the synopsis of the movie, so the viewers know what it is about.
Yeah, it's essentially about a young man named Duvo who lives a complicated life in a favela in Rio named Santo Amaro. He, like many of the people who live in the favela, flew kites as a child. And so he sort of has this idea, he's in daily conversation with somebody who we believe is his guardian angel, and there are other angels in the movie. And so him and his guardian angel, have these deep conversations about life, about what it means to be redeemed. And he believes that putting on a kite festival will help sort of absolve him of the damage he's done in his community. And so the movie kind of like asked that question, what do our deeds mean while we're still living, and what happens to our memories, but also what happens to the things we do once we pass as well.
Why did you decide to do a movie about Brazil when you just told me now? I thought you were Brazilian.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Told me now you are American and Afro-American, and your mom from Mexico.
That's right. That's right. That's
So
right.
why not Mexico?
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
Brazil?
sure. That's a great question. No, I speak fluent Portuguese. I've lived in Brazil for a lot of, for a long time. I have a lot of friends there. And also, to be very honest, my friends and I wanted to make a movie together.
Mhm.
That's kind of what happened. And we made it with, very little resources, just me and my friends making a movie together. That's kind of how it happened.
That's very interesting. Did the Duvo or any of your friends ever lived in a favela?
Yeah, they all live there. They all live
They
it.
all lived
Yeah,
there.
everyone lives there. Yeah.
Wow.
Everyone lives there. So there's like a lot of moments in the movie, right, that feel like a documentary, right? Especially with the young boys and the young kids, and so much of it, does feel like a documentary because it's so honest and it's so real.
It's I really loved there was a scene when the kids go to one of these vendors and they ask for a bottle of something with 10 glasses.
Yeah, that's a real scene. That's a real vendor. Yeah.
And the vendor says, "Do you want some more glasses? Do you want to sit down?" You know, it was fantastic. That
So good.
shows how, and that I think is the same vendor that then was talking to Duvo at a certain point and was telling him, "What are you doing for the community? You're just doing for yourself. I give things to people. I give it for free." So
Him.
that
That's
is
him.
very touching, very,
Yeah,
very touching.
he's so much
And
totally.
tell us also a little bit about what he's doing in Santo Amara, because he is the boss.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Totally. So Duvo's character is based on the actual real favela boss that lives in Santo Amaro, right? I met the real favela boss, gang boss. We would have to ask him permission every morning to film in his favela, and me and my friend Alex, who's from there, would walk up to the top of the favela most mornings and asked for permission. Every morning we'd be like, hey, is it okay if we film? And he said yes every single morning. The only thing he told me to do was to buy the children kites and sodas every day. And so over the course of 5 years, we maybe purchased over 1,000 kites.
Wow.
1,000 kites and maybe 500 bottles of soda, over a 5 to 6 year production calendar. But no,
Pretty
that
cheap though.
yeah, 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 for sure.
Compared
No,
to-
no, no. The it sounds expensive, but the kites maybe cost like 50 cents, right, each, right?
Wow.
So it was great for everybody. But no, Duvo's character is based on, this actual favela boss who I saw every single day. The first day that I met the actual boss, he was getting his nails done, just like that scene when Duval's getting his nails done. In that same seat, by that same person, by that same woman, she was doing his nails, and then I asked her to be in the movie and to do Duval's nails. And so a lot of it is based on real life.
It's very, very interesting this because, and also what I think another scene that really struck me
Mhm.
because these kids that sell drugs for him are kids. They're
Kids,
kids, young kids, 10, 11, something like that. And at a certain point, there is this guy who they say has taken Duvo's bag
right, right,
and they just shoot him like nothing.
just like that.
That really struck me. And they have Kalashnikovs, they have all kind of.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. That's a real part of the favela sometimes, It's a complicated place. To me, it's a very safe place. It's only dangerous and violent sometimes when the police comes and starts chaos. But sometimes, there are moments when, unfortunate things like that happen and people's lives get taken for crossing each other or stealing, whatever it is. But, there is order and structure in favelas, and sometimes death is a part of it.
That was really very hard for me to see.
Yeah.
And obviously, you see the parallel between what you describe in Brazil and what's going on in this country.
Totally.
Tell
Totally.
us a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting because, the day that we were premiering at Tribeca was the same day that a young boy was killed in Santamaro in that favela by the police, right? So it was a really complicated day. You know, the movie for me is such a complicated movie because on one hand, it is about joy and youth and innocence and kites, these universal objects that people from all over the world fly, and it's a really beautiful experience. It reminds us of our youth. And on the other hand, it is about death and police violence. So the actual day that we premiered was the day another boy was killed in the favela in the same place where we filmed for 5 years. So, there is a complicated story there, and there are parallels, here in this country with George Floyd and a lot of the sort of protests and uprisings, about police violence, it was eye-opening, but for a lot of places in the world, like Brazil, it's been happening for a really long time, and it doesn't really get reported on in the same way that it would here.
Yes. And that's another important point about your movie is that report something that, as you said, is not, it doesn't get out of Brazil. Let's put it this way.
Right.
I
Right.
don't know if in Brazil is reported,
Right. It
doesn't
is.
get out of Brazil that much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm hoping that this movie can kind of help that conversation.
Yeah, it definitely will. And tell me about the idea of the angels,
Hmm.
whom nearly all of the characters, the main characters, are talking to. They are all talking to their guardian angel. And
Mm-hmm.
they are all kids like them who have
Yeah,
been killed by police.
that's right. That's right.
Tell us why you thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think this idea, right, for a lot of, for myself and for my family, for a lot of people, I think who come from similar communities, right? Like this idea of this question, who's protecting us, right? If it's not the state, if it's not our government, if it's not our police, who do we turn to? Is it organized religion? Is it each other? Or is it these sort of mythological people we know as guardian angels, right? Um, you know, I believe in this idea of a guardian angel. I think a lot of people do too. And so it didn't feel outlandish to think that my characters in this movie could also be having conversations with their guardian angel, right? And it's almost like the more violent things get and more absurd the world gets, the more I think a lot of people turn to faith,
Yeah.
to these guardian angels, to surrealism, to all these sort of things. And so for me, it was just an example of that, of as violence increased in this movie, these characters also very young, had people who were looking after them and protecting them.
You said it took you 5 years to do this movie. Why did it take so long?
It took me 5 years to make this movie because there was never a script, right? Like there was never a document that we stuck to. The story and I continued to evolve. My friends' lives continued to evolve. There was so much more that we always wanted to add, and I also think like this was my first long form narrative feature, and like it was just an experiment in filmmaking, like an experiment in how to allow and how to follow a story and not so much control what a story in film can be, but to tell the film, ask the film what it wanted of us, essentially, in this way that for me, I didn't go to film school, so this is kind of the only way I know, right? So it was a really exciting sort of moment, and I don't think I'll ever have that much time to make a movie again.
No, that's very,
Yeah,
very unique, it sounds like.
totally.
When you first approached the boss and
Yeah.
said to him that you wanted to make a movie, what did he say? How was reaction?
Yeah, sure. He wanted to know what the movie was about, and he wanted to know how I would be helping the people in the movie, and he was like, "Listen, I don't ask for much. I just want you to buy these kids kites, and buy them sodas." And I told him about the idea for the movie, and he loved it, and I can't wait to show him eventually.
Wonderful. So you never had any problems since that day.
No, there was never any problems. Like I said, I think there's a misconception about favelas. I felt safest inside of the favela, way safer than outside of it. We never had an issue. Everyone was so excited to be in the movie.
It's very funny because I live in Harlem. And
Mhm.
when I tell my friends in Italy or in other places that I live in Harlem, the first thing they ask me, "But isn't that dangerous?"
Right, exactly, right, right.
Because this is what the narrative is, right?
Totally, totally.
And I feel the same thing. I feel more at home here
That's
than I
beautiful.
feel in Italy.
Beautiful.
This
Wow.
is my family. And
Mm,
that's the reason why I started to do this show, My Harlem Portraits.
that's
I want
incredible.
people to know the excellence that is in this community.
Beautiful.
Your movie starts with the news that 5 young people from the favelas Honorio were killed by the police.
Mhm.
And the reporter says another one of these cases is not an isolated case.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about this. Why the police goes and does these raids into the favela? What is the excuse?
Yeah, I think it's rooted in a few different things. I think number one, Black people in every community around the world always suffer the most, and there's always discrimination, and there's always negative stigmas about Black communities all over the world. I also think, it's a sort of anti-Black, anti-poverty excuse, to disrupt communities that to me are safer than any other place. I think it's just something that is not new to the world, that Black people and communities around the world suffer the most discrimination.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Let's go back to the angels because the guardian angel of Duvo is
Yeah,
Phil. He
yeah.
was a young man who was killed by police. And not only he looks out for Duvo, but he also gives him counseling and experience,
Right.
his experiences and ideas and so on. And he keeps on telling him uh, that he has lost his mission. He
Mm.
wants Duvo to find himself. Tell us a little bit about that role that is playing.
Totally. It's almost like if we had a guardian angel that we could speak to, what kinds of questions would we ask them, but also what kind of advice would they give us, right? I would hope that if I had a guardian angel who I spoke to, that they would be as honest with me as possible, right? That they would tell me when I am messing up, that they would tell me when I'm doing good, right? And Phil for me is such an excellent example of that. He's someone who doesn't hold any punches. He's honest with Duval. And even at the end of the movie, right, when Phil and his angel friends looking into the camera, and he goes, I'm not going today. I'm following the script, right? I'm following the script, and I'm not going down to help save Duval because essentially Duval's story has already been written.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going down. Yeah. I'm letting it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned it before that Duvo thinks then to redeem himself is to organize the kite competition
Mm.
that has been canceled.
Right.
He goes and buys all these kites and so on. And there is a moment in which he says, kites changed my life.
Mm.
They can take you anywhere and give you freedom. And that's why it does that. So tell us a little bit about that point of the kites and how important it is for these kids.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, there's something so beautiful about about kite flying, right? Like there's something that is so innocent and pure about it, you know. It's these pieces of paper that are made with pieces of bamboo wood, right? And it's like such a simple act, but it's so beautiful and it's almost so purifying, you know. And so for a lot of people, you know, there comes this moment when, you know, children become adults and teenagers become adults and we lose sight of the innocence of our childhood. And so Duvo in that rooftop scene with Derek is remembering what he once felt with kites. It's a really important scene because I think we start to understand why this gangster named Duvo, who is complicated, wants to put on a kite festival. We also learn that there's still like innocence in him, that there's still purity in him. And I think towards the end of the movie, when he's fatally killed by the police, I think we feel for him. And we also, I think, when we see him right before the movie ends, we see his face and we see him smiling, you know, and there's this beautiful moment for me. It makes me question, well, if our good deeds and our good actions live beyond us, beyond our physical lives, do we even ever really die? You know, and the end of the movie for me is really important to express and show that.
Yeah, because you show that the Kite Festival is held. Is
Mm,
the one who has organized, although it's not there anymore. And then at the end, when you show all the T-shirts with
mhm,
the figures of the people who have been killed,
mhm,
that really brought me back to
mhm.
Black Lives Matter and all the
Yeah,
T-shirts
yeah.
and say your name.
Hmm.
That's exactly what it is. There is a very important parallel there, and uh, unfortunately, this shows that this kind of violence against the young Black people, it's all over.
Totally,
It's
totally.
over.
Yeah.
And it's, I've been in Brazil,
Mhm.
and a friend of mine,
Mhm.
Flavio, whom I met in New York, his mother is Black and his father is white.
Mhm.
He brought me to their homes. His
Mhm.
father lives in one of those beautiful penthouses on Copacabana. And his mother, we drove through a tunnel and then we stopped into this place. It looked to me like an abandoned factory.
Mhm.
He says, let's go. And I said, where are we going? He said,
Right.
my mom's house. And her mom, his mom's house was a tiny little space where four people lived.
Wow.
And it was Christmas. And the whole building was coming down to have food, the food that his mom was cooking.
Mm.
Everybody was coming down.
So beautiful.
It was so amazing. I could not believe it. And they were all so warm and so nice. And
Mhm.
everybody welcomed me, and everybody was getting
Mhm.
fed. I had tears in my eyes because I
Right.
thought, my God, these people have not much,
But
but
also everything, but have everything. Right. Absolutely. I had the same experience there. The
yeah.
same. Very. Yeah.
And as you said, I've been around the favela with my
Mhm.
friends, but also with people I didn't know, and I never had any problems.
That's right. Never. That's
Never
right.
had a problem.
That's right.
Uh, there is one moment in which, towards the end, the angel says, time on earth and time here is different. On
Mm.
earth, they say a Black man dies every 23 minutes, but from here,
Mm.
it looks like 23 seconds.
Mm.
Black people die all the time.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was so touching this thing. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. I really wanted us to think about this concept of time and to think about, you know, what time looks like from heaven potentially. You know, on earth it may feel longer, but in heaven it maybe feel shorter. You know, especially when you have such a, I imagine,
yeah,
such a view of what's happening on earth. You know, but yeah, it's true. I think that was really powerful, powerful scene for sure.
it is. So what is the message you want the viewers to take home?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the messages I hope is that, we can sort of understand how complex it is to be human, and how, you know, Duvo, I think, is a perfect example of of any of us, right? Of someone who is both capable of hurting and damaging, but also capable of loving and of redeeming himself, and of doing good. And also, like asking the question, like, what does it look like? What what do our actions look like, through the eyes of our guardian angels, to me is like a really powerful and important question in this movie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At the end of this conversation, congratulations for the film.
Thank you so
I
much.
really loved it. I think it's going to be very important that
Thank you.
people see that. And so I give you my best wishes to have it shown all over.
Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate it.
Thank you again. And thank you to my viewers. See you next time, next Saturday, 12:30 p.m., Spectrum News, and for all past episodes on my YouTube channel, Maria G. Cavenaghi, My Harlem Portraits. Bye bye again.
Bye
Ciao.
bye. Ciao.